All right, Dobro Yutra, another video. It's kind of early, but I'm going to try this anyway. You know, to those of you that believe in retribution and punishment in this world and the afterlife according to the standards of whatever God you believe in, you have a problem when it comes to the actual enforcement of this justice, because very often, especially for Christians who believe in forgiveness, it amounts to justice denied. If justice delayed is justice denied, certainly injustice forgiven denies justice. To those of you who don't believe in retribution, punishment, and afterlife, well, you're kind of home free. You can argue that inflicting injustice in the name of righteousness is not justice, that two wrongs don't make a right. But for those who are steeped in a moral testament tradition, a more patriarchal tradition of religion, you have a certain dilemma which is summed up in the book of Isaiah in the King James Version, which says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." Or if some have said less poetically but more pointedly, God is funny. And he works in mysterious ways in order to enforce his judgment upon the nations, with a rod of iron, or as it might be, with a curtain of iron. Let's take one particular notorious incident of human history, the worst in the preceding century, the Holocaust. And we can add there the little Holocausts perpetrated in this same area by local forces, as well as the larger one engineered by the Third Reich. We see here that there was absolutely very little retribution inflicted upon either the perpetrators or the nations from which they came for collaboration with this Holocaust and for perpetrating their own Holocaust. We take an example, the smaller Holocaust in Poland after the war. In 1946, when a mob stormed an apartment building in Kielce in southern Poland, dragged out 75 men, women, and children, butchered them in the street. One of the perpetrators even had the gall to say that he was proud that Poles were not too cowardly to strike a Jew, even though some of these people were fresh from Auschwitz. And even though these Poles had themselves lived under 5 years of Nazi oppression, they can still behave in such a manner toward fellow human beings. We can also take as an example the famous pogrom of Bucharest in 1941, where legionary troops, the kind of people who are still held up as role models for the younger generation after the years of communism and modern consumerism that's supposedly destroying culture and civilization. Well, these role models took out a bunch of Jews, rounded them up from their homes, put them in a slaughterhouse, cut their throats, hung them up to drain like livestock, and thought themselves jolly dudes for doing so. All right, where's the justice for this? Who's going to inflict the rule of righteousness upon such people in such a nation? Well, no one else was in the neighborhood to do so, certainly not the Christian forgiving West. Only one power was in the neighborhood, willing to take war criminals, mass murderers, perpetrators of crimes against humanity by the scruff of the neck, lift them up, and give them what they deserved. Well, now, as though you're applying collective guilt. That's not fair to such people. Well, the standards of most religions, of all religions that I know of, aren't fair in this individual sense. If you're going to judge the nations with a rod of iron or a curtain of iron, as it might be, well, collective punishment means that people are judged for the sins of their fathers and the deeds of their brothers and sisters. That's the nature of divine retribution. It's no different in kind from when these perpetrators justified their own actions by saying such Jews were agents of Stalin anyway, that the NKVD that executed our poor patriotic activists were all Jews, and so it was merely justice on our part, take out these Jews from our midst, and to give them a taste of justice. Well, I'm sure that Stalin lost not a night's sleep over you taking out the Jews of Bucharest or Kaunas in Lithuania and slaughtering them in the street and looting their property, such as it was. I'm sure no one in the Kremlin could have cared one bit. So whatever revenge you thought you were getting for this, whatever righteous punishment you thought you were inflicting, was lost entirely upon those whom it was aimed at. The same as in Poland after the war. If by going after a soft target like the Jews, part of the Judeo-Bolshevik conspiracy, you thought you were getting at the Kremlin, you couldn't have been more stupidly wrong than if you had tried. The Kremlin could have cared less. However, that doesn't mean it can't be an agent of divine retribution, unwittingly. For after all, Lord's thoughts are not your thoughts. So, the golden rule means anything. In this case, it might be its original version, as found in the Torah. As you have done unto others, so shall it be done unto you. Now again, those of you who don't believe in theistic punishments, you're home free on this. Two wrongs don't necessarily make a right. Inflicting injustice in the name of righteous retribution is not justice at all. But for those of you who do subscribe to traditional religious ideas on this, well, then you have a problem. Whereas what might seem unjust to you is just in the eyes of God, that he might use agents for enforcing his will that don't seem right to you. But who are we to know the mind of God, and who are we to question it? So it just might be that 50 years locked behind an iron curtain is an adequate price to pay for crimes of this nature unrepented of. A very light penalty when you consider the atrocious sweep and scope of such a crime. That its main perpetrator, the nation of Germany, should be divided, and part of it at least placed behind a ghetto. Quite poetic, quite ironic for a people that were so great in engineering ghettos for others, should find at least themselves partially behind one of their own. One could only hope that this divine sense of humor had been extended to the entire territory and population of the former Third Reich, but half a loaf's better than none, I guess. So with that thought in mind, I'll bring this to a close. Just my random thought on a theistic dilemma of justice upon the earth and who can wield it. And as always, thank you for choosing YouTube as your form of communication.